And we will read them off at the end for you. Again, thank you for being here. You are here today for the final seminar in our seminar series, History, Challenges, and Successes of the Natural Resources Decision Making. I think I switched that title around a little bit, but that's okay. So this is the final seminar in our series featuring Mashuska, otherwise known as Jon Greendeer. And he is going, but before we get to our speaker today, I would first like to go through a couple of acknowledgments. First, I'd like to thank Scott Hingstrom. He's the director of the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife, and he has helped tremendously with the organization of this seminar series. So there were 7 seminars in all, and Scott is an extension professional here at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. He's also a professor. So much of what we do is geared towards bringing wildlife science and natural resources information out to the public, to professionals, and to students alike. So thank you, Scott, for all your help. And this is also our College of Natural Resources Spring Seminar Series. Though the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife organizes it, we try to make this an interdisciplinary seminar series every year. So we'd like to thank the College of Natural Resources for all of their assistance and for their for their welcoming and for them allowing us to hold this in the building and for their support in this seminar series. Finally, this is something we like to do every single time that we have a public gathering, including virtual gatherings. We recognize the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point occupies lands of the Ho-Chunk and Menominee people. Please take a moment to acknowledge and honor the ancestral Ho-Chunk and Menominee land and the sacred land of all indigenous peoples. So with that, just a reminder, this is the final seminar in our seminar series this spring. If you are interested in any of the other seminars, which were all focused on natural resources policy setting and decision making, they're all available on the CNR's YouTube channel. So if you just go to YouTube and type in UW-SP College of Natural Resources, it'll come right up, and there's playlists for each of our seminar series, including this one. So they're all available for you to watch, and they're all really great, so you should definitely check them out. And then, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker. Scott Hingstrom will introduce our speaker. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Jennifer. It is my pleasure. I serve as the director of the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife. Our office is located right through that wall, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding where we are. Happy to invite all of you over there, and we can talk about future seminars that we will be planning here very shortly. It's been a joy to be able to have people here for the seminar series, and we would like to say that we saved the best for last, right? It is really a pleasure to be able to bring who I formerly knew as Jon Greendeer here, but now Mashuska, who it's a new name for me, and I'm pleased to know it, and hopefully I'll be using it more in the future. But Jon, he has a degree from UW Marathon, and then from there came here to UW-Stevens Point. And he started as a student in the College of Natural Resources. But he once upon told me that he had trouble with the science. And so he moved on into, he moved on to the political science arena, where he did receive a degree here at UW-Stevens Point in 2004. He moved on then, and he worked with his Ho-Chunk Nation as an executive director and became the president, an elected president of the Ho-Chunk Nation in 2011 through 2015. Since then, he's been working and now works as the health and wellness director, and he's focused on culturally informed diabetes and obesity prevention through fitness and dietetic education models. Jon's developed service models driven through community-integrated, indigenous, and sustainable food systems on foundations of holistic, cultural, and ecological principles. I've had Maushka speak in our classes before, and I've enjoyed listening to him and thinking. He's a very thought-provoking speaker, and I look forward to hearing what he has to say. Please help me welcome Jon.
What else did I do, Scott? Oh, na chini karigi we know. Mashu sky guide. Ho chunky jana got chunky cottage wound. Eske hoji shana ke hoke wahide ide shuno. Peje gage uruguyana ga niki shana ji. Yaun chakje eske hoji shana hichakota hada. What he karashide da wound. Eske higuanachti. Ho chunka da woshkanaga. Hikaroke hada manga honiki da gikshane. Did you guys get that? So I hope someone who's dictating got that word for word, because that's the best I've ever said it. No. What I said, I introduced myself, Amashuska, which means white feather. It's what they call me. It's what I've always been called. Jon Greendeer is my tax-paying name, and since I don't have any warrants, I don't mind you guys using it. I had the privilege of being asked to do this, and I'm a member of the Deer clan, so it's one of the lower clans for our people. So for our particular clan, we're workers. We are messengers of our upper clans, and we are what most colonizers will call environmentalists, but I don't think we called them that. I think there was this common sense that we took care of our earth because we had to. So a little while ago, my friend had asked me to speak. I've been able to speak with some of you guys before. Thanks for spreading out so much so I can keep moving back and forth. But today I have a wonderful opportunity to speak a little bit about our way of life, our culture, our sovereignty, things through the lens of not necessarily just government, but also through the lens of traditional cultural heritage or traditional ecological knowledge, or TEK. So at any point, if you guys just need to fire off a question, jump up, be calm about it. I mean, I'm not gonna, I don't have a written speech, as you can see, because if I did, the sucker would go on for a long time. And since they've had me, they know I can keep going, so they're like, we gotta be out of here by 5 o'clock. What kind of bullshit's that? So let me get started by saying, yes, I am a graduate of UW-SP. I'm a proud graduate. I served on the alumni board. I'm actually one of the distinguished alumni. I even got a little spot somewhere. I never actually went over there and seen it. But apparently, whatever I did, I fell upon something that made an impact on somewhere. But and I'm not that humble. I just don't know what the hell I did to deserve that. So after I graduated here in 2004, that seems like a long time ago. I always think of it just the other day, But I graduated here in 2004, and I began working for the president's office. I had no idea about the Ho-Chunk Nation. I knew I was a tribal member. I knew some words, but they had me on my first day of work as the president's right hand. So I was the executive administrative officer in charge of 3,400 people that I thought I knew. I mean, about 70% of the workforce is non-tribal to begin with. 85% of the gaming workforce is non-tribal. 50% of the government workforce is non-tribal. So I'm not just a tribal boss. I'm making sure that all of our families and our shared communities are taken care of as well. So I got into that business, and boy, it was tough, because in our culture, you got to be you got to grow up around our people, just like any community. And if you don't speak the language, and if you come in talking like a white guy or whatever it is, or have all these college degrees and you don't have any of the cultural knowledge, you become what they call an apple. Why? Because an apple is right on the outside, and what color on the inside? White as ever, like Betty White. So it was really hard, the school of hard knocks, I should say. But since I work in Black River Falls, which is about an hour and a half away, I've been driving there since 2004. I used that time to learn the language from an old lexicon. So I am one of the only language speakers that learned from a book, never a recording, never wrote anything down. I just speak and I translate a lot for the older folks that would have stories. I'm definitely not fluent with what we call proficient. So that did help. As a matter of fact, I thought it was gonna open some doors for me, but what it did is just the same thing college does. It makes you ask more questions and try to figure out the answers. So when I got in, and a part of this is, part of my abstract here is talking about getting to the table. And I'm sure by now, by giving the list of speakers that you had, you found out that it isn't that easy, right? It isn't that easy to make change. You can have all the heart and passion that you want. You can even have all the knowledge that you want, but if you don't know how to line the players up and aren't ready for defeat and misery, you're probably not going to do much in life. And I'm being very honest with you. I will give you direct testimonials of how this machine actually works and how to make some changes, because I've been fortunate enough to be a part of some major changes that took place, not only to the benefit of our tribal and mixed communities, but also to the benefit of our environment. Now, when you decided to go to school, like me, sitting in this very classroom here, learning about natural resource management, wildlife management, and you've got everybody in here, you try to look across the thing and, who's going to be successful in this room, and how do I become outstanding? And you start to realize that you're just a small person in this whole thing. And the things that used to work a long time ago don't work today. And it's sad, but it's true. I loved Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. I loved Aldo Leopold. But you hand me those books today, and they're more of a symbolic piece of how things gain knowledge. Now the game is a lot different. The game is social media. The game is money. The game is market. The game is multinational industries. And this is a little bit of what we're going to be talking about, because that's who you're going to meet. So. I just turned 50, so I'm dying a little bit inside. It really sucks. Like, everyone's like, "Oh, you're really fit and you're doing really good." And I was like, you don't understand. There's something about this that really sucks. But I'm going to use this little bit of pre-baby elder status for a second. When I was a kid, and it was still color when I was a kid, not like Scott when he was a kid. But we used to have burn barrels. Maybe some of you do, but Mom and Dad, you had two things of garbage. You had combustibles and you had garbage, And pretty soon after a while, everything kind of burns, right? They still throw linens in there, and dishes and the deceased pet and shit like that. Whatever burned, all these black smoke. It was something that we normally did. And then later on, I got to live through this evolution of recycling, and that was a big thing. Like, if you could throw your can into a recycling container rather than the garbage. And if we had Facebook back then, you would actually post about it, just to get some sort of acknowledgement that you did something really good for the environment. And so we had these cultural shifts that were taking place that actually were intended to get us to be conscious about what it is on the aggregate sense that how we're impacting our government. And then we start to realize that we start getting away from this change, these mode changes, that we start to be oblivious to some of the major degradation that's going on, like the proliferation of frac sand mining across the I-94 corridor. Dozens and dozens of companies have actually just switched their whole game to frac sand mining. And they don't even know where to go with it. They're piling it all up and waiting for the best market to happen. They've got sand so big it looks like freaking dune out on the southwestern portion of the state. And at the same time, we have some familiar names that if you go into the environmental field, if you want to be an environmental advocate, you are not going to make it through without hearing about GTAC or Billiton, BHP, ExxonMobil, Perrier. You're going to learn about mineral extractors and larger corporations, CNH, and all of a sudden beef industries. All of those things matter. Agricultural fields, USDA, who the lineups are. These are the players in the game, and they're huge, and they have unlimited resources. So if you think Citizen A is going to jump up with a microphone in somebody's gymnasium and give their 3-minute speech on a piece of legislation and change the world, probably not going to happen. Probably not going to happen. You've probably all been there before, whether you're speaking against mining, whether you're speaking against mineral extraction or farm ag use, CAFOs. You're probably going to run up against something. And sometimes you're going to run into some of these things where the decision already has been made. And that's going to not seem like democracy, right? That's going to not seem like your voice matters. See, I'm a product of Schoolhouse Rock. You guys remember that? Some of you? There we go. So for those of you who are born after the millennium, it's kind of this little crusty little version of how bills become laws, and it kind of gives you an idea, almost honest, an idea of how things happen. But I'm going to give you a couple case studies. The first one's going to deal with Badger Ammunitions Plant, which is now called Ma Wakanchunk. It was always called that. Ma being earth, Wakanchunk meaning sacred. It was a sacred earth property. And just south of Devil's Island is this 1,553 acre parcel that went up for surplus. So back in when was that, when it was last active? I know that in the 1990s, late 1990s, the federal government says about Badger Munitions Plant, over 7,000 acres, hey, you know what? We're all done fucking this piece of territory up. Let's give it away. So the USDA jumps in and grabs a parcel. The DNR grabs a parcel, and they start parceling it out, doing some ag there, and then they have roughly 1,500 acres left. The state jumps in on a claim for that 1,500 acres, and the Ho-Chunk Nation finally, for the first time ever in the late 90s, gets notification that there is land up. So what we missed here was what's called right of first refusal. That means the land was actually unlawfully taken from the Ho-Chunk people and used, commandeered, for whatever purposes, in this case, full of nitroglycerin, trinitrotoluene, you know, a bunch of petroleum hydrocarbons, you know, combustibles, propellants, and they really jacked this little place up. And all of a sudden, they're like, we don't need it anymore, who wants it? So we were never given right of first refusal, so we actually lost out on over 7,000 acres of that land to begin with. For the last 1,500 acres, the state decides that now that we have a claim in there, oh, let's give you half of that. Let's give you 1,700 or 750 acres of that, and we'll just hold our hands into the sunset. Well, the Ho-Chunk people were like, this is all ours. So we ended up, this started in 1998. We went on until 2014 when we received that entire parcel back. Now, I'm fast forwarding a lot of this. So in order to do that, you have to deal with, well, there's two versions of Iron Triangle. Any political science students, Iron Triangle with the Congress and the bureaucracy and the interest groups. Okay, so this is how the world works, or how it used to, 20 years ago. You have Congress who actually makes the laws, you have the bureaucrats who actually run the laws, and you have the interest groups who actually kind of influences the laws. So the interest groups are there to do a couple things. Number one, they're gonna get you in office. That's what you want. As a politician, you want to get into office, you want to stay in the office, and you want to see how you can benefit from being in office. Doesn't make everyone a monster, but some of them are pretty vile. So Congress actually caters to the bureaucrats, creating laws and policies. Bureaucrats cater to the interest groups to make sure that they're doing everything right. And it goes backwards the other way. It's a mutual relationship. And nowhere are you in there. Now, when I say interest groups, I'm not talking about you creating Cindy's law, so Cindy doesn't get, abducted from somewhere. I'm talking about interest groups that have now morphed into multinational corporations. These things have unlimited supplies and resources, and they're able to do a lot more than what they could do back then. And when I say these megalith companies, these are companies that can and have survived the latest pandemic. They didn't just survive, they've 20 times more wealthy than they were in 2012. They have profited immensely. They will not die. They're going to be there forever. Sorry, we're not going to downsize. We're going to continue to conglomerate all these into one massive owner. You can't touch them. But we have certain advantages these days. So when the land actually came back to us, it took us to look at a different Iron Triangle. And this is something that we tend to deal with, which is what we learn in early civics class. We have the executive, the legislative, and judicial. Now, it's the same type of concept there. These things run off of each other quite a bit. And so a lot of times we like to wave our flag and say this is the patriotic American way. We have checks and balances, we have laws and order, and we have enforcement of laws. And that's, I hate to rain on your parade. I promise to leave on a good note, by the way. But it doesn't really happen that way. And so, and here's why. Because the interest groups / the multinational, very big empires actually do run the show. Now, I can say that right here. Anyone, any doctor of political science, philosophy, anyone wants to stand here and contest me, I will vaporize them into a carbon burn. Because I will take them on my dime to Washington, D.C., and I want to show you the machines that are walking through the Dirksen building, the Hall building, the Cannon building, the Hart building. I want to show you who's there. Because guess what? None of you guys are there. You don't get a seat at a member of Congress's office. Oh yeah, you can go there with your mom and your dad, sit down and have some cranberries because they're from Wisconsin. But as far as any ability to move any type of legislation, that's not going to happen. The people that make the laws are not in those offices. This Iron Triangle actually builds those congressional laws. So when you see someone authoring a bill, they didn't write that. The sugar company wrote that for them. And they had their writers, and they do all the lobbying for the members of Congress. So the names that are on the bill probably didn't even discuss. So the reason why I bring that up is because you have to know what you're facing in front of you. because it's not an impregnable force. It's not something that you have to lay down and accept, because we have some other tools to us. And this might sound a little patriotic, but we have the union of citizens, and not just the interest group, but we have this thing that we didn't have 20 years ago. We have the ability to project our voices to a broad audience in a very short period of time. We have social media. Now, it works quite well in some areas it doesn't. Because if you're Rio Tinto mining company and you get a black eye but made $47 billion so you can buy shit like Twitter, that's, oh, well, I'll live, right? But if you're an industry that is going to create a legacy of in a sustainable business, you don't want that bad PR. You don't want to wear that around you. And so we have this thing, and this is the part I think is absolutely amazing, is because no matter how much money they have, this union of citizens can create the narrative. And this is what happens when they come together and you see things like, what's the latest thing? Enbridge, right? Enbridge is Wisconsin's very own DAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline. We've got line 61, 6A, 13, 14, line 5, line 3, and they're all chugging a bunch of crude through the state, and they're trying to control the narrative. They're saying that the reason why you're paying $4 a gallon is because we need to pump more oil through your state. By the way, it doesn't stop in here. It goes somewhere else, and most of it gets exported, and nobody knows how to frickin' turn crude into gasoline anyway to begin with. But it doesn't matter because it sounds really good. I'm so mad about the gas pumps that I'm willing to believe that. Until you guys show up, the science people, the people that are smart, and understand that this is not how the narrative really is, and that the plate that's being set here is being, misdiagnosed, and we actually have to come up with solutions that are long-term and sustainable and less impactful for the government. So in looking at Badger, going back to Badger, we have to hit that iron triangle, whether it's the bureaucracy, which means this is Obama's administration, Obama's Secretary of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs, his Office of Solicitor General, his GSA, Government Services Agency. This is the agency that decides whether or not the government should keep some 400 acres or a plane or a boat. They have to get rid of everything. That's their job. And so the disposal process is something that we deal with. It is highly bureaucratic. It is toxic in some areas, as we found, and I swear I'd love to just do a story just on the badger retrieval. I did 22 trips to Washington, D.C. in 1 year just to get badger back. Here's the deal. If you go up as a member of a tribe, I don't know how it was when I was a kid, but when you go up nowadays and you let them know that this property was unlawfully taken, that the property was damaged, that it's going to take generations for this property to heal it, and that it is rightfully your ancestors, and you can trace linguistically, archaeologically, socially, and culturally every tie to this land, and it's yours. You are not going to get a human being on the other line that's going to start coughing up tears and writing legislation for you. That is not how things work. How things work in DC is you create law. You actually create the solution and you set it in front of them and you tell them what it's about, because that's the only place ink is going to fall. You have to walk them through the entire process, and you have to get your alliances, and you actually have to do their work for you. So once this is done on the bureaucratic side, now this has taken a lot of effort. Most of the trips were just for the executive side, the bureaucratic side of this. I got to know President Obama. I don't know where your politics lie, but I'll tell you what, when you get into this game, it's not Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. It is, you got 8,000 people that you got to take care of. You better come home with a pound of flesh. It doesn't matter what you believe in. So me and President Obama became very close, and he did invite me and my wife to his house, and we got to go over and visit and things like that. So that was cool. I got pictures and everything. They're not Photoshopped. They're actually real. I was gonna play as girls on like Nintendo or something. But realizing that it is so jacked up that even a person of great leadership within the bureaucracy cannot even satisfy simple requests, and that there's always going to be 3/4 of a solution at a table. It's important to remember. Because there's always going to be that one person that says, well, we do it, but we got to check with Bob, and Bob's been sick with COVID, and whatever. There's always one person that makes the decision not at the table, and that's kind of what you deal with. On the legislative side, we have legislation going forward. We have what are called omnibus bills, bills that are must-pass legislation. So if you don't pass the American Defense Bill, then your big brother Kevin isn't going to get his Kevlar and his bullet rounds, and you're going to look like a piece of shit in front of your colleagues. So you have to vote for it. But that's when all the pork barrels politics come in. So all the little fancy things that even some of our state representatives, or I'm sorry, our federal representatives, or U.S. senators and representatives bring to the table they throw those in omnibus bill packages like the American Defense Act or some of the other larger pieces of legislation. Those all go through committee. Once they get passed, they become ownership. On the judicial end, I file a lawsuit to first on right of first refusal, second on a property case. So acquisition of that property was illegal to begin with, and that was easy provable. So these things usually get settled out of court, and they usually get gifted and granted. But since the courts cannot offer land into trust, I was not running that one as hard. So we're hitting them on all three different levels. This is what takes a lot of trips. And so if I don't know how you are, but if you're away from your family as long as I have been, like even a day, I gotta come back with something. I gotta produce something. And so when we go there, and I look at our own tribal history, what we had some great leaders in our tribal history that have been a part of this initiative. All of them spoke with passion and conviction, but none of them actually showed up with the legislation and the homework. So we had to do our own EIS surveys and studies. We had to do our own backgrounds. We had to write our own case law. And so we actually had to do all the work. And that was the difference that separated us from the other 500 plus tribes that were actually there. So we end up amending the defense bill, including that. I actually got to write a piece of federal legislation, so I'm proud of, because sometimes they'll say, you ever hear that expression, oh my God, it takes an act of Congress to do that. Well, it actually did take an act of Congress. And I got to be a part of that, and we actually did receive that land back in full trust, which means we have full jurisdiction over that, which was an accomplishment of major success, and a learning lesson for me that taught me that things are not what you think they are. And for anyone that's going to make a change in environmental policy or advocacy, you're going to have to game up, because they are not going to lay the track for you. It is a difficult process, and it's a rewarding one. But I'll tell you what, the toughest part is you don't keep your same allies at the very beginning of the game to the very end of the game. You got a lot of people in support of you, but once you get so far, you're going to have to start cutting your losses here, because you have a goal to focus on. Another case was Wingra Stone. Are you familiar with Wingra Stone out in Madison? Wingra Stone is mineral extraction, and they have a place just north of campus, and they had dug out all of the gravel in this area, except for this one area where there is an eagle effigy and some endangered plant species, and a lot of the history there. There's surface level artifacts, including arrowheads, which aren't, keep in mind that the mound system and the arrowheads are two different eras, just like, birch bark canoes and teepees are from two different areas. And unfortunately, we teach people that. And, when you're in high school, you learn everything you can about Indians and headdresses and shit like that, and you have to unteach everything. But in order to address this issue, he, over at Wingra Stone, decided that there was over $10 million of mineable minerals under the mound. So his idea was to excavate the mound, move it somewhere else, and then mine the materials. The Ho-Chunk Nation raises opposition, and immediately Wingra Stone bought half of the state legislature, and they passed a bill saying that if there is no evidence of burials in this mound, then the state Department of History or Historical Society must remove that mound and take that out, which is basically the same as if I go to your grandma's grave and I kind of peek in her coffin and see if she's in there and she's not there, I can move her grave. Now, I wasn't great at science, I'll admit that. But after working as a historical preservation officer and heritage preservation director, we went upon a lot of inadvertent discoveries, and so around springtime, about this time of year, we have ice jams that brings up the shores, and we have a lot of our ancestors that come up, and we had to do that last week. So we also have the start of construction season, so we actually have a lot of notifications of people that have found burials or individual body parts. So we actually have to go out there. Used to be cool at first, but then after we realized that, hey, it's not that cool. These are people's graves and things like that, and they're my family's. But when Greendeer Stone decided that they were going to pass this legislation, we found out that over half of the state legislators thought that the burial mounds did not contain any human remains. When you investigate, one of the things that we kind of make sure that we don't do is do shovel tests or dig anything up to see if there's evidence of that. So typically we'll find teeth or some things oddly preserved in different areas that we can't tell you exactly why. But when the human body degrades, we call it a grease stain. It's an oil stain. It leaves a signature that the GPR, a ground penetrating radar, can pick up. So there may not be bones, there may not be hair, there may not be clothes, there may not be anything, but there will be a vestige of oil in that area. And it's going to be a thin line, but it actually sends a signal back up to the GPR. It actually tells us. It doesn't give you that outlaying, so you don't see anybody buried like that or anything like that, but you definitely know that there's somebody in there. So this is why if there's any type of ground disturbances to the ground, so if you're running a tractor or anything like that, you can shake the ground and break that signature up and basically eliminate the evidence that there was a burial there. Greendeer Stone had done that to some extent. Like I said, they were extracting gravel. They were running the heaviest machinery that there is. Then he even proposed, I know what I'll do. I'm going to build a mantle under this thing, and we're going to dig under it, and we're going to leave everything there, and then we're going to stuff it full of other stuff that we don't need. So while this is going on, we found out that our biggest campaign was not a money campaign, it was not a vote campaign, it was not a smear campaign, it was an educational campaign. We spent most of our time providing education about the mounds, which means something that we had to learn a little bit more about the mounds. Now, for a Ho-Chunk culture, that's a little bit odd, because when you leave someone, a deceased person, and you leave that grave, you never look back. Once you bury them, they're done. They belong to the earth. You gave that back. You gave them back to the earth. That's it. And now we're forced to break our own rules and come back to these places and start promoting them in a campaign called Save the Mounds. And this is really difficult for a lot of folks some of the cultural folks that were around back then. But we did that with that educational campaign. That bill was stricken from law and did not become this. Now, on the environmental side, the impacts of that over the course of time are going to be great, because there are a lot of places where mining companies are looking at where there are close in proximity some of these burial sites that they no longer have wished to utilize those sites anymore. So these are some of the areas where we realize that when we go up to, you can't just this is, environmental advocacy is not like and share. That's not it. Your armchair advocacy is only going to get you so far. I don't care how great you write your comments or your anything. You're going to have to get rubber to the road and get out to the offices and actually speak with people and get to know their job better than they do, get to speak better than they do, know their job and become tenacious. And this is exactly what it took for us in order to receive our land back and also to stop some major legislation from going through. We are not done. Everything is still in danger. So when you walk out these doors, you have to think about what is happening out in our environment, because a lot of this is passive unless you're paying attention to it very closely. We have the Pinoki that mining project that was going on up north. We had Rio Algum. We have the Back 40 mine that had taken place in traditional territory of the Menominee. We had Perrier water coming from mineral extraction at the headwaters. We have the Arrowhead Weston power line. We have, just a number of these items happening. And most of these come with the idea of we're going to create jobs. Our economy is going to be better. The people that don't want you to mine, don't want you to have power lines, don't want you to extract these minerals are against jobs. They're against profit. They're against progress. And this is the message that they try to kick out. But let me take you up to little towns called Sainer or little towns called Mellon. And I'm going to show you the promises that they were given 30 years ago and what they look like today. I can't even afford bread up there now. But these are post-industrial towns that had once been given the idea that their ability to accept certain mineral extraction is going to lead to their benefit in perpetuity is gone. It blows away like a fart in the wind. And they're gone. These multi-corporations, they didn't come to employ you guys. They're not going to come to Stevens Point to put you guys to work. They got their own workers. They make a lot of money, and they come down from California all the way from Rio Algum to down to the Gulf of Mexico. They have their own workers. So we do have, the ability to create these alliances, and we do. We have a few organizations that have risen up quite well. So some of the No DAPL movement. If you guys get a chance, and if you're unfamiliar, look at the Dakota Access Pipeline and look at what happens when citizens, not just tribal folks, citizens stand up against multinational corporations that are going to be coming through. Look at how the EPA responds, look at how the South Dakota Natural Resources and Energy Council responds, and take a look at how the Army Corps of Engineers responds. Because these are the people that give you all the information you have that you get in your books. And then all of a sudden, in 2 seconds, they're like, well, okay, you can drill under that freaking river. We don't care. And the things that they were told that we feared happened already. They spilled the oil. They had the ruptures, and we still continue to have them. But again, there's that black eye that will heal at the expense of creating a lot of revenue. So, how does this work? So when we form an interest group to protect the environment, and we do this with good cause, we cannot do it alone. We have to find and discover other businesses that have a stake in the game, other individuals, other organizations, other chapters, and we build those alliances. And sometimes those alliances are going to be strange alliances, like back in the 90s when we were fighting a lot of Wisconsin sportsmen over spearfishing. And then we started aligning with them against the Crandon mine because they were going to destroy the northern Wisconsin fishing industry. Things change over the course of time. Once these alliances are made, then you have to find out if you're going to be able to have some angle or some allies within the government itself. So again, I'm not an anarchist, Democrat, Republican. I have less faith in the system that I went to school for and believed when I walked out of these doors. I thought if I studied and if I worked really hard and if I said things really nicely, people would follow. That's not the case. Our nature as Ho-Chunk people is to carry ourselves a little bit lightly. As you can tell, I'm real calm. But to be more pragmatic and practical about situations, to carry ourselves with a little humility. So it's hard to walk into these businesses and these agencies where decisions are going to actually be made and be humble about something. If you want to be humble and cute and save your little area and niche in the woods, you're probably not going to get very far. It takes a lot of tenacity. It takes, and you're going to fall down and get back up. So the things that we're doing today, whether it's looking at some of these mining projects or cutting them off early, a lot of these projects are still going on. We have a system now that provides notification of environmental degradation about a third way through the process. So that means that you're going to get notice about an environmental threat at, and you'll have to show up on June 11th at the Spash Auditorium, and you're limited to 22 minutes of speech, and you can sign up, and half the shit's already going on. The heavy machineries are already on the field. And so we didn't get notification. And all of a sudden, you're not able to speak adequately to that. And it is a property issue. It is a due process issue, which gives notice and opportunity to respond. And by that time, the permits are already done and the things are already in motion, the interests are already made. So we have to, and it's hard because of our system being, whether it's Republican or Democrat, again, their system is to get elected, to stay elected, and see how they can benefit from being elected from this. And so all we do is try to, once you get in office, is try to build a system that will keep you in office, not necessarily do all those wonderful things. So, Katrina, Representative Shanklin, good friend of mine, we used to go biking at midnight on the Green Circle Trail every night, but I don't drink, so I can't hang with those guys. How can you drink and bike? I guess it's a white people thing, I think. I don't know, but we dialogue this, and she's pretty vicious. But at the end of the day, when she goes into that office, she's not going to be able to kick out a lot of legislation that's going to pass. She's got to make some concessions, and so that's basically what politics is. We have had success, or we wouldn't continue to do this. But we have to realize that outside something is happening. Like I said, I'm 50 years old. The things that I do, like if I could say that there was a wake of accomplishments behind me, or there's something big in front of me that I think I could handle, it no longer benefits me. I'm done. It's probably not even going to benefit my kids or their kids. This goes back into something that one of our higher teachings called 7 generations. And the reason why we have what we have today is because 7 generations ago, some of our ancestors, some of our that we're descendants from, were thinking about the world that they were going to leave for us. It's difficult, but you have to think long term like that. So when we start to address, the fact that railways are going through traditional cultural properties, or that our reliance, our system, our entire system, whether it's on resource management, or whether it's even on global economics, is in a fragile state. We didn't realize how fragile it was until we had something like the pandemic, right? We realized that, hey, we still have people milking cows, slaughtering pigs, growing corn, and they have nowhere to go with it because 1,000 school districts closed. But we still have people that need to eat and need to drink. So the big problem was the supply chain. How do we get that food from there to the people? How do we how do we store it? How do we refrigerate it? And so we realized that because we lost in the supply chain, we were pouring out millions of gallons of milk and throwing, good meat out into the fields. So we started to invest a little bit more and start looking ahead for crisis management. And now that we do that, we can actually work in front of some of these issues. And so this is one of the biggest things that we have. The things that I'm telling you are more on the reactionary side. What happens if they apply to do a mine? What happens if they do some mineral extraction? What happens if they go through traditional cultural area? Well, we have to game up and we have to look ahead. And it's easy to do. My friend he's so awesome. He's so inspirational. He said, you know what? You know what makes white people really crazy? I said, what? He said, those things right there. See that thing on the wall with those little arms? They go nuts over that thing. He said, it makes them crazy. He goes, these things too. So if you know how to manipulate those, you can make them nuts. You can just, because I'm gonna wait for Jen to get all crazy, because you gotta be out of here by 5. They get all nuts about that. But you gotta know. She did like 5 times. I'm just watching, going, I can't wait to spring that one. But you start to realize and you start to look ahead at what corporations value. And it's not just simply money. You take a look at decision-making authority. Who is at the table? Who sits at the table of the USDA approving some of these foods and approving some of these medications? Who sits at the table of the agriculture boards? Who sits on the table of the energy boards? These aren't people that came up from UW-SP and got this degree and were valedictorians. That's not who they're appointing. They're appointing people that were in charge of Nabisco and in charge of, whatever, corn companies and fertilizer companies. That's who's running this place. You take a look at, one of my favorite authors, Michael Pollan, who actually gives the lineup of the entire USDA and what's being approved. So getting rid of the word imitation, because you can't sell anything that has the word imitation on it. So get someone to approve that. How about not labeling correctly? Things like that. So you start to know the player, you start to know the game, and you start to know the system. Once you know the system, the games, the players, you actually know exactly what to do ahead of the time before they do that. So we're lucky to live in Wisconsin. We really are. We have a very pristine state, but we cannot say that it is because people love it. That's why we have to say it's because there are people out there that are willing to put their lives on the line in order to protect this little piece of earth that we call ours. Because if we don't, we walk out, we jump on our bus and our bikes and our cars, we go back home, we play on Facebook and TikTok and shit like that, and nothing ever happens. We just don't see it happening. We don't put everything on cruise control, and then in 10 years, there's no more truffula trees. And the Lorax cries, and it's miserable. But we have to understand that when you commit to your role in natural resource management, wildlife management, that you have more than a moral obligation to be out there to keep your eyes and ears open, because the people that aren't here doing what you're doing, they're not paying attention either. But they're going to be looking to people like yourselves in this profession to give that testimony, to be the expert witness, to contend the rhetoric with science. And I still stand by the fact that science will always win, even though I'm not good at it. Science will always come out ahead. So I want to take some time for some questions. Look at this guy, just sweating over here. But I'm happy to answer any questions and go into any detail on or off topic. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. So two things. One, I love your use of the word tenacious and tenacity because I think it is an underlying theme to the work that we're trying to do. I'm wondering if you could, you talked about some experiences that were, decade plus in terms of getting from point A to point B, and I'm wondering if you could reflect and maybe share on a time where you were experiencing failure in that process and sort of what that looked like for you, what did you learn from it, and how did you take that potential failure or actual failure and recover and use that to move forward?
Very good question, and very relevant. Badger, for example, as the president of the Ho-Chunk Nation, I cast the deciding vote to not secure Badger back, to abandon the effort. And the reason why I did that was because the land had tested out so horrible. I had no land use plan. I had no ability to pay the property taxes if it was just given to us, because in order to avoid property taxes, it has to be placed in the federal trust under our name. That's a big project. That's why it was so huge to have that built into that piece of legislation. Or I still would have been questioning mark on whether or not we should take it. So I did cast the deciding vote not to put that in. I was called in by the traditional court. These are our clan leaders, our elders. And they were so nice to me that day. I always promised my team I'd take them in the arm, but never in the chest. And these guys literally wiped me out. But they told me some things in their language that that got me so mad, not at myself, but at the situation like this. It took me a little bit to realize it had nothing to do with the land. It had everything to do with the principle and what we stood for, and the people that started this with less and did more, and why it was important to come back to us. If it didn't, I don't know. I think in the end, I looked at what I don't think I did something wrong. I did something that was right and wrong. I think did something that was practical and reasonable, but on a cultural side, it was just wrong. And so, yeah, there is those times when you feel like you got to take a knee on an effort, and sometimes you just don't have the allies with you. These are lonely trips. These are trips where you're storming the castle and you think you have this big sovereign nation behind you, and you don't. You have sovereignty. You're not an interest group. You're not an entity, organization, corporation, or private entity. You are a sovereign nation, and that's one of the toughest things to remember that I would tend to forget. And then when I stopped forgetting, I walked into those places like I own them. Those were mine. You work for me. And there was never a time when I backed down ever in that room. And when I did, and I wanted to share this with you, we got to the table and we were just about ready to get this legislation passed. I decided I would not sign the indemnification agreement, which basically was an agreement that said, we'll give you the land back, John, but if you guys start getting cancer, you start growing an arm out of your forehead, you can't sue us. And I didn't sign that. But in the meantime, I was working on the federal legislation, and that was actually moving forward. When we got word at this meeting that this legislation was going to pass committee, and one of the sentinels from the Office of Solicitor General just hit the table, and he got up. He goes, "Is that what you effing want?" Suits all around this table. "Is that what you effing want, President Greendeer? I don't know why everybody jumps up and gets all scared when you're showing up in Washington, D.C., but this is a crock of shit. You're going to give your people all this poison land, and you're going to step on that like you just killed the fucking lion?" And then federal agents had to pull him out of that meeting. This was a guy I depended on. This is a guy that wrote stuff for me that was my friend, and he popped off, and I didn't realize that he's been working against me the entire time. And I looked at Secretary Mike Black, and I said, "How many more of these folks do you got in here?" And he's like, "Nobody." Well, I wish there was more, because we're going to win this fucker, and I want to see how many of these guys were working for you at the same time we won. And that's all on record as well. That's all video recorded. So so when I left, I was so mad that everything, me being a diplomat, me being articulate and reasonable and rational, me having to come home to the people that swore that these people were demons, and now I finally agreed with them. You know, I spent my whole life looking at people as humans, and I never seen anything so indignant in my life. And this is why our people actually named white people a different name than humans. They call them maihates or mahihates or big knives because of the babies that they carried on their scabbards to scare us away. That's what we still call you today. And I always wondered why that was placed. And so these are historic things that when you walk out of that building and you just stop, I'm with my buddies, I'm with my friends, these are my workers, these are my bros, these are my chums. And I just stop there. And we're young and we're kids and we can do whatever the heck you want. I'm a president. And I sit there and I just cried because like I'm a grown man and I just cried thinking that this place was behind me the whole time. So those are real moments. Those are things that really don't give you the best encouragement to move on. So, you know, we do go back to our fireplaces and we do go back to our songs and our stories and traditions to build our strength. And it's hard to do that, you know, and wake up the next day and call these people. You know, I'm sure you've had those awkward conversations with your spouse or your friend where you had a big ass fight and all of a sudden you have to come back and you have to make amends, and we have to do this because I take care of people. They're my people and I take care of our earth. So yeah, long answer, short question. Question. Is there a question over here? Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to work with lawyers that work with the trend kind of quite hand in mind. To realize that lawyers hire scientists. And I was kind of like thinking, this wasn't pro bono work. I mean, this costs money. So when we're fighting the Pinocchio mine, you know, up north, Granite mine, you know, there's money behind this. So I was wondering if you had something to share about, like, I mean, just is gaming kind of like providing some resources to fight back that wasn't there before?
Yes and no. You know, Jeff Crawford was instrumental in the Crandon mine, earlier Crandon mine, in organizing the legal defense. One of the first things to do on the advocacy level is, you know, you're going to have the emotional response and social response, but you're also going to need to develop a legal system, legal response. You don't win these wars because you have a great legal team. They never win. The legal team, good legal teams, are going to file on property ownership. They're going to file a different tort. They're going to do a mass claim. They're going to do they're going to contest the impact study, and they're going to do these things because they create the successional dilatory response that's going to take 180 days to respond, and then you get another 60 days for this. And the corporation actually does math. They're really good at mathing things, and mathing things means, oh my God, we're not going to be able to actually mine our first mineral until 2027. And by that time, the break-even is going to be about 7 years from that point on. This is what makes them pack up their bags. So a good legal team will actually create enough red herrings to thwart a lot of those. And that's exactly what has happened in every major mining industry that has come up. It isn't just a matter of permits, because the permit issuance is a big a deal. You know, when we all celebrate, oh, the Army Corps of Engineers didn't give them a permit. They'll get their permit. They'll get it at some point. So the administration changes at some point. The pendulum swings and different people become in power. So yeah, it is a matter of, you know, tribal gaming can be used, but typically isn't. Usually what will happen is a legal defense fund will be placed up, and then interest groups will be able to contribute to those as well. There is a lot of pro bono though. So a lot of the work, a lot of the groundwork and research is either done by paralegals or some law firms that will be done outside with perhaps tribal attorneys, but for the most part, other resource groups that we have out there. They're the ones that have been fighting these and have enough history in fighting corporations like that. So, yeah.
So just like kind of follow up on that for more like armchair environmental stuff. It's like, do you work with organizations like the Environmental Legal Defense Fund or NRDC? Because like, right, a lot of people are aware of that, but a lot of people don't know that, right? Like, if you're going to donate money to an environmental organization, right, the Nature Conservancy isn't the only one. Like, there are organizations where like what they do is provide legal support for folks like you all, and right, your support of them, right, inadvertently or kind of indirectly.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good point to make. Yes, we do. Yes, we do work with a lot of environmental folks but again, those are reactionary to have a defense fund and proactively, going back to our assertion as a sovereign government, we have the ability to exercise ourselves as treatment as state. So we don't have to run through any hoops. We can create environmental standards of whether it be the air quality, water quality, soil quality. We can make those standards by ourselves, and through full faith and credit, the state must abide by those. Anything that travels off. We do use our legal, outside legal sources to help draft those legislations up so that we have some parity in what the state offers, but we can offer higher stringence than the state through federal legislation. So, and we have. Bad River has lowered their, or increased their standards for water management. We have as well, since we are in that 94 corridor, so you have that 2.5 ppm from the silica sand. We're still question mark as to the effects of that, whether it is causing some of the bronchial issues that are taking place. It's certainly out there. So we do have air tests that are out there. So we are able to create our own standards. That's something that other agencies and individuals don't have. We're also able to set those standards in federal legislation as well through direct consultation. Now, 20 years ago, I said consultation is getting up to the table and yapping. It is something that mandates both federal, state, now even many of the counties mandate tribal representation on anything that could impact a tribal community or a nation itself. So we actually do get up to the table through that. And because we have that space up at the table, a lot of citizens group actually are the ones that come to us to offer up their versions of legislation. So we're doing pretty well in that area. It's just that these corporations are unlimited with what they have. They bring in the best of the best. But you don't have to win the war. You just have to break a spoke in that whole thing, and the thing's going to fall apart, and it has. So we've done that with mounds legislation, mining legislation, power line legislation, and we've done that quite successfully. I wish we were a lot more on it, but for the most part, tribes are actually one of your best advocates now. They're recognizing their authority, and that's that's what hurt Aquila Resources up there is the Menominee tribe. They've just went full throttle, and they got the best firms ever, and they've been backed. A lot of these firms will come up pro bono because they want to stand on the body. They want to have that wind behind them. So we also use the NARF, which is the Native American Rights Fund, and so that actually is a re-granting. It's also a law agency, but it's out of Colorado, and they actually bring on the best of the best in particular fields, whether it's land claims or mineral rights. 3 minutes.
Yeah, let's have one more. Oh, I guess my question is like, as a young person going through
Talking about me?
and like who doesn't have necessarily like disposable income to donate to orgs or like necessarily a ton of time either being a full-time student, how is like the best way to help? Like it kind of feels like, I mean, your presentation was great, it was not all doom and gloom, but it was definitely like realness in terms of like, yeah, there's like a great machine rolling and you can break a spoke, but it takes a lot of effort just to break a single spoke. And I think like as a student, like that's kind of a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So I guess like my question is how
Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome question. Social media runs. So it is tying yourself to some of these groups that have formed up. So if you take a look at Pinocchio or Back 40 or anything, you're going to find these other groups that, I mean, just follow me, I'm freaking on them all the time. But they'll have these gatherings, which are absolutely amazing. They're almost hybridized from Native American and environmental folks. And you get to meet the players and the scientists behind them. So just aligning yourself on social media, getting the notifications, actually turning your notifications on. There's a lot of amazing things happening. Fundraisers, that's been my easiest way to give $20 or something like that. You know, it doesn't make me sleep better at night, but I've been at the receiving end of those things, and just a little bit of funding really does help a lot, even if it just gets you cookies to have a meeting once in a while. So align yourself on the social media, social networks, find folks that are environmental advocates themselves, and align yourself with some of the law firms that are out there, because they're not clandestine. They are out there. They are trying to, utilize get their services utilized. Billable hours is really what law firms exist for. So. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, John. I know we are running short, and we have another group that will be coming in, so I'm going to ask if, John, you wouldn't mind moving out with us into the lobby, and then you can continue to converse with us.
After par.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.